Now coming to tonight's session, please allow me to welcome Mr. Sai Satish Vedam, the moderator of this session. Mr. Vedam is the Chief Product Officer, Executive Coach at the Institute of Product Leadership. He was most recently the Senior Director of Product Management at Oracle. Great to have you here, Mr. Vedam. Handing the session over to you.
Thank you, Shama. Good evening, folks. Those of you who are continuing with us from the first session, hello again. Those of you who are joining this session, welcome to the fourth day of the strategy edition. Pretty insightful sessions from executives and senior leaders in the product industry. So, encourage your friends, colleagues, and peers also to be part of this. Before I introduce our distinguished speaker today, just a really quick housekeeping check. Please be interactive, ask questions, but ask them in the Q&A chat if you're in Zoom, or ask in the LinkedIn Live if you're joining from LinkedIn Live. Vinay, just to make sure that you are on, can you turn on your camera and say hello so that we know you're here? Vinay, can you hear? There you go.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, now we can and see you as well. Super. Thank you for joining, Vinay. So for those of you joining us, Vinay Shenoy is going to talk to us on a very interesting, relevant, and useful topic. And all of you on a Good Friday at 9 p.m. joining this session is a testament to the fact that how important it is for many of you, right? So that's good. So Vinay heads the YouTube's Global Partnerships programs. He's got over 2 decades of experience, international experience in C-level strategy, in CXO engagement, and global scale operations. In fact, prior to that, he was a country head at customer success acceleration at Google, corporate strategy in HP. While this is an awesome career path and profile, Vinay, what excites at least me, what is interesting to me, is you've driven over 25,000 kilometers across 10 countries and sailed off Mount Pilatus in Switzerland and did a bungee jumping from the world's most challenging bungee jumping venue. Now this tells me you take calculated risks and disciplined and focused on execution. Without this, none of this will happen. I hope you agree with me.
All right. Can you all see my screen?
Yep. Let's go ahead.
Thank you for the introduction, Sai Satish. What I took away from this audience, it's interesting. So let me see if I got this right. So most of you aspire to be product managers. You want to be more customer centric. And lastly, you're looking forward to learning more about synthesizing data, packaging ideas, and selling them to your peers and managers. So hopefully you'll get some of that as we talk about pivoting your careers, finding that skill set. And what I'm going to do today, folks, is share some of my own experiences. So as we talk about careers in tech, the one thing that you all know is careers today are not linear, right? So this is no longer the era of my father's or my mother's time when they started a job. At least in my case, both of them were with the same firm for almost 40 years. The sectors that we are in, tech, media, biotech, they evolve very quickly. They're dynamic, and very often, if you start your careers in these sectors, you will end up making pivots. You will end up taking calculated risks. And sometimes these pivots are driven by circumstances that are extenuating. Some other times, these might be pivots that you have driven. One of the things that I have found it's useful is always to look back and reflect. If there's a pattern behind the pivots, what's driven some of your thought processes. So that is something that I will share with you today. And hopefully none of what I'm about to share should come as a surprise. And the other disclaimer or warning that I want to give you all is like I'm big on quotations, so you will see my slides littered with quotations. So hopefully it's not too heavy for a Friday evening. Does that sound okay?
Yes, let's go ahead.
All right. So I'll start with one of my favorite quotes. This is from Steve Jobs, right? And what he's essentially saying is, in order to look forward, you have to take a look back. And I would urge each one of you who are here, to also look back and see if there are some patterns that have driven your decisions from the time you've decided, what sort of education should you pursue? What was your first job? What has caused you to pivot or make those changes? Invariably, as you get more tenured, you'll notice that there are patterns to your thinking. Sometimes it's frustration with the current role. You get straitjacketed. You want to move on to different things. At other times, it's advancement in terms of within the same ladder, within the same expertise, you want to grow. Third times, it could be monetary pivots, all of which are legit. But for each one of us, I think as you think about your journey, I'd urge you to just take a few seconds and reflect like what were some of those pivotal points when you made that shift. And that'll be helpful as you look, join me, reflect along with me, my journey, and see if there are patterns that you see on your side, right? All right. So let me talk a little about my journey. As most of you would have figured out, I am from India. I was born and brought up in several different places in India. And I think to a large extent, as I look back, that's what's defined me. So another quote from Charles Darwin comes to mind, survival of the fittest, right? It's not the one that's the most intelligent. It's not the one which is the most strongest, but it's the one that's the most adaptable, tends to survive, tends to thrive, right? So my journey started, I spent the first few years growing up in Mumbai. My parents were in government jobs. They got posted to Pune, then we moved to Delhi. So as a kid, I've stuttered and stumbled across 6 different languages, schooling systems like convent, public school. I went to Manipal for my engineering degree, took up my first job around the dot-com bust. Not the best time to graduate, but I was fortunate to find a role with Infosys, then SAP, and then I managed to move to the headquarters. I realized a few years down, I'd hit the glass ceiling. I wanted to get further education, get more of that finesse to round off the analytical acumen. So I ended up going to ISP, and then moved back to Bangalore for my role. Then eventually made pivots from services to consulting services. And I'll talk about all of this in a bit. But each of these journeys could have gone in different directions. I've made some choices, and as I look back and reflect, they were driven by that innate desire to learn something new or get out of my comfort zone. But I was also fortunate in terms of the choices that were available to me and the people in my network, right? And that is something, as I will talk through, are really important as you start talking about pivots. So let me move on. So I started my career with Infosys, as I said, long time back. And one of the things that struck me as I was reflecting on this journey with the folks from IPL, there's nothing else. And if I can leave you with just one thing today, as you start thinking about pivots in your career, it's this one statement, right? Growth and comfort cannot coexist. And you see this manifested in different ways in some of the bigger firms that you see or hear about. At Amazon, the mantra is every day is day one, right? So Jeff Bezos wants to inculcate that entrepreneurial mindset, never stay satisfied with status quo, keep driving change. At Google, it's a somewhat different philosophy. It says the same thing, but manifests itself in you're at your best when you're uncomfortably excited. So notice the word uncomfortable and excited, which means there is headroom to grow. So as I look back at my career pivots, if I have to break down like every role that I have held, I've tried to give it my max, my best. And I've also tried to see, in addition to the day job itself, is there 20% more that I can learn? And is there 20% more that I can learn that is aligned with my interests, something that would help me evolve? And at early stage, when most of us take our first job, it's hard, right? Because you're paying your dues, you're learning, you're scaling up, you're spending a lot of time and hours trying to build credibility. But a lot of us also are trying to figure out like, hey, do I need to pursue my next degree? Do I need to get those credentials? So when I look back at Infosys, definitely I'd studied my electronics engineering from Manipal, but circa 2002, the careers that were available, there were a handful of choices. So I was fortunate I got through Infosys. It was a very elaborate process, all India work, and you had to give several battery of tests. And then by the time I got in, what I had studied and what the role demanded were two different things, right? So the first 6 months, year or so were long hours just trying to understand like, hey, how different is coding, and based on the clients that you work with, the technology was different. So you have to learn, you have to unlearn, you have to find common patterns. This probably is a familiar story for most of us. It started our careers in the IT services industry. But what I also realized was I was looking at folks who were in those roles 5 years, 10 years down the line, and they were doing fabulously well. There were some really nice, intelligent folks that I really loved learning from. As I looked at my own career aspirations, at that point of time, I knew that eventually I wanted to get on the management side. I wanted to explore more beyond just the technical aspects of the role. I wanted to be at technology meets strategy meets scaled operations. I wanted to be at the intersection of that. And folks that were in those roles 10 years, 15 years down the line, they were good, they were doing well, but I couldn't see me being that person. And that's when I did my day job. To be honest, I was okay at it. I wasn't the best, but whatever came my way, I delivered, I over delivered. All deadlines, all timelines, and we all do this at our jobs. But what I also started doing was putting my hands up for those assignments, which were probably slightly outside the domain. So anytime there was something related to quality control, quality assurance, project management. So at least my peers those days, they looked down on those things, saying like, that's not a techie's job, that's admin, that's grunt end. But that allowed me to gain exposure to some of the senior leadership there because they cared about these things, right? So what level is your project at? At that time, it was CMMI levels. How efficiently is the team scaled? What does trainings look like? What is the strategy to get everybody to a certain level? Because end of the day, you're also talking about your team when you're pitching new engagements. And somehow I found that time, and that became important for me, as you see, when I moved from Infosys to my next role, which was at SAP's labs, which was at that time in Bangalore, which was more of the R&D product incubation center. It was just starting up. And interestingly, I was referred by one of my colleagues who I hadn't directly worked with, but who had seen me closely. And we'll talk a little bit about these network effects as well when we go forward. So when they interviewed me, that already initially shortlisted me for a technical profile, but they saw some of the other aspects that I had done. And at that point of time, it was very interesting when they said like, hey, we have two profiles. This one is technical, you'd land well day one. This one is a little bit more interesting, the other profile that we have in mind. It's internal product management. So we are looking to streamline and standardize our product go-to-market, or what was internally then called as product innovation lifecycle. They said like quality assurance, quality control will be parts of the job, but you will get to work with a brand new organization that's growing from 200 to 700 people. You will have to do trainings, you'll have to coordinate with a lot of product owners, and you will have this opportunity to get a little familiar with how to run strategic programs, going from projects to series of interconnected programs, how to run operations at scale, because some of these products, ERP, SCM, CRM, they're not developed in silos. They're developed across different competency centers. SAP at that point of time had 8 labs. So there was this element like you would get to talk to somebody in Tokyo, you would get to coordinate with somebody in China. Doesn't sound great from work-life balance because they're all across time zones. But that's where I think I saw the opportunity also to say like, hey, I know in my head I was 22, 23 that time, and I was like giving myself 3 years or so to get to my MBA. I was like, hey, all these experiences will help me, because one of the challenges that time was it was hard to stand out, right? So imagine this: you're at one of your IT services firm. There's a cubicle. There are 4 of you, all equally talented, all accomplished, all very driven. All of you are applying to the same B school, or all of you are applying to the next product company whenever they come in town. What's going to distinguish you, right? So why are you going to stand out, or why is somebody going to give you that first shot? That becomes important. So I was in my head a little bit more conscious and deliberate about trying to get that experience and show that I was able to show an impact beyond just my chosen competence area, or beyond just what somebody would have expected me to. So I started picking up those 20% projects even here. So when I came at a very interesting juncture there, and which I'll talk more. So I did get an MBA admit, and at that point of time, my manager made a counter offer where she said like, let me give you something that fits in with your aspirations right now. And that opportunity basically meant I had to move to a small sleepy town of 5,000 people in Germany, which was where my company was headquartered. And I took that opportunity without knowing honestly what it would entail. But that gave me exposure to product management at the highest level, how corporate strategy was planned, and at the same time, my knowledge that I acquired of product rollouts, internally how it works, and tying that with how it's positioned externally, or how it's, as some of you mentioned, like how do execs actually package this, make a business case when they have to sell it, when each product manager has to sell it to the CEO. I got a bird's eye view of that. Earlier, I had a worm's eye view, bottoms up, how does it roll out? And that gave me appreciation, but that also made me realize that, hey, as I'm peered with some folks who really have strong experiences internationally, deeper introspection, I found myself lacking, not just in terms of finesse, in terms of the polish, in terms of communication, but also my ability to tie aspects like financial, strategic, product, and bringing them together. So I said, time to go do what I knew I wanted to do long back, do my MBA. And I went back for that, right? And then that brought me to my next pivot. 2009 was probably the worst time to do your MBA, even because of the financial crisis at that point of time. But I was fortunate again. I did land a role, which was with Emphasis and HP at that point of time. And what I did again there was package the roles at SAP, which were closer to this international program management, strategy meets operation, because the role that I was pitching for was head of corporate strategy and competitive intelligence. My MBA definitely helped, but I did not have proven credentials. So I'm glad that they took a risk on me, but there was also that element of really going prepared when they had those interviews. So you could really say, I just don't know the theory of strategy, but here are practical applications. I was able to correlate that to my experience. And again, The pattern here, while the day job was corporate strategy and competitive intelligence, that gave me opportunities, some that were provided, others that I put my hands up to interact or work on projects with the CEO, the CFO, the CIO, or even some of the business leads as they started putting together acquisition plans, country strategies whenever they wanted to enter new ones. And let me be honest, some of this comes at trade-offs, right? Because if you're spending a lot of time earning credibility in your day job, which is the 80%, which you absolutely have to do when you make pivots, because for somebody to give you that stretch assignment, you got to be nailing your day job, right? You got to be doing it really well. So it took me time, but I started getting those other projects, including a very interesting assignment on partnerships or alliance management. And that time, Emphasis had a very interesting holding structure. It was an HP company, which means HP held a 75% stake, but HP was also the biggest customer. So imagine if your stakeholder is also the biggest customer, they know your financials, they know your margins, then it becomes very, very tricky trying to position and sell services through two channels, direct and through HP. So that gave me a very, very good understanding of, constructively trying to figure out how do we position, how do we synthesize, how do we resolve conflicts, which is what I saw earlier, that, these were one of the three things you were looking to talk about. But that made me realize in my head all along the earlier formative years, I was like, I want to do corporate strategy. I want to do all these roles, and I had experienced some of them. But this new whole idea of being where the rubber hits the road, you're representing your firm, you're also representing your alliance partner and your biggest customer. And how do you find that situation where it's a win-win so that there is repeat business? That appealed to me. And when the opportunity came for me, I took my next role. SAP at that point of time was opening their management consulting practice in India, and it was customer facing. So at this point of time in my Emphasis role, I did not have customer facing experience. And honestly, I'd left customer facing experience almost 10 years before, right? When I was at Infosys, all my other roles leading up to the SAP second role, which was in management consulting, they were all internal facing. So I remember my last question at the interview saying, the manager who was hiring me said, you've got stellar references from your earlier colleagues at SAP, but how do I know I can trust you to represent the firm when you're in front of a Fortune 50 CEO? You've never done that, right? And those are hard sells. So you can't come up with something because you've not done that. But what I was able to call out is like, in my current role, I interface with CEOs, I interface with CXOs. Yes, they are internal, but the scope of problems, what I'm trying to solve, and the dimensions which it entails, like going from trying to prepare my CEO for a press conference with a 2-hour heads up in the morning, to basically figuring out what's our Japan entry strategy, to then figuring out which of these two companies should we acquire or why is a particular business unit underperforming. I was able to translate that into what she needed, which was like, hey, one day you're going talking about an organization change management, you're doing org redesign. Next day you're going to some other place and telling them, how do you actually optimize your licensing? You spend so much on licenses that you don't use. So what can you actually work through? So it worked, and it also worked because a lot of people that had worked with me, not known me, worked with me, put their credibility or put their good faith at stake when they said, no, I have worked with him, take him. That becomes essential. And we'll talk about some of these aspects when I talk about networking as I go forward. But again, the pivot here was drawing on some of the transferable skills from the main job and then picking up some additional skills, in which I'm fortunate. My manager, she walked her talk. She put me in front of some of the biggest clients, Fortune 50 CEOs, CIOs. And it was one of the best learning experiences I've had. And if I look back till date, it was probably the best role that I had. There is a high of understanding what your CXO partner wants, closing that $1 million deal. And then the management consulting practice that I was part of, success was actually you have to close the engagement, but you also have to position products from SAP. So there's a kicker and combo, right? Consulting engagement and then product sales. And because you're selling the product and the engagement, you also have to be there to say, hey, I said it would, you get so many benefits. Did it actually deliver that benefit 6 to 9 months there? So the proof is in the pudding, right? So you are also there to see this engagement through. But that came at a personal cost. I was on road almost 300 days out of a year, sometimes going with one-way ticket. And it forced me to think about what I wanted. And at that point of time, I was married, just starting a family. And my next pivot was not professional, as surprising as it may sound. We do make these pivots sometimes for personal reasons. And I moved to Google. In some ways, it looks like a no-brainer, right? It's such a reputed brand name. It was even then. I took a pay cut though. So as somebody who was a jet-setting, high-flying consultant, some ways it was also recalibration, moving to an internal role. And it was a big pivot because so far I had been an enterprise guy at heart, right? I worked in B2B settings where my clients were actually big enterprises. In Google, I joined as internal strategy and operations for advertiser services. So it was a pivot from, again, a little bit of product to product services. But it was a pivot from enterprise to SMBs. And again, that area is very, very dynamic. I had to unlearn a lot of things that worked for me. I didn't know what lean agile was because enterprise roadmaps have to be robust. At that point of time, it was classic SDLC. You really had to think through your business case. You really had to get your BRD buttoned up. The PRD took time, 6 months. And by the time you made work packages, made a product, shipped it out, it was a good 3 years. Not so at an internet company where things evolve. So it took me time to find my feet first couple of years. But again, as I started understanding the core products, read AdWords, and the core customer pain points, because the projects that I got were like, how do you drive up satisfaction of customers, small and medium customers, millions of them? What are those silver bullets? And this is what a lot of you also said that you are looking to learn from IPL and from other places. Like, how do you actually synthesize these data points, 44 different countries, thousands of customers? Like, what are some areas? Can we improve the product? Can we improve the service? It took me a couple of years to understand that landscape. And then it also made me realize I missed some of the partner facing experiences that I had. That allowed me to make a transition internally where I took up the role of country manager or regional country manager for UK and Ireland. And because I knew the product, because I was internally established, it allowed somebody else internally who had seen me, observed me, in other ways to take a risk on me. And he did, and hopefully I was able to deliver to what he'd asked. I attained my sales targets, my internal product-related targets, and also Google is very people-centric, so your team gets to evaluate you. I delivered on those. And then what I realized was I'd hit a glass ceiling there too, because again, you're in satellite offices, there is up to so much you can go. You can get to a director, but probably beyond that, you need to go back to where the action is, and which was the headquarters. And again, I was fortunate. There was a role where somebody could identify with my earlier experiences, and that's how I landed at YouTube. Here, again, it's a very different scenario. So I work today in terms of creator programs, identifying partners that would succeed with more interventions from YouTube. And this is B2C, but not the consumer, where it's creator, right? So even at this juncture, I find that there is so much to learn for me. And that's what keeps me excited. That's what keeps me motivated, right? So going back to the point that I made, growth and comfort do not coexist. So you have to decide what you want, right? Do you want to be the big fish in the small tank where you know everything, you're revered, you're admired, or do you want to be a small fish as you move to a slightly bigger tank? And that's the analogy I would draw. When I found I was getting to that stage where I was getting saturated about learning new things, normally that was around 18 months to 2 years for me. I would go all in and then figure out my learning curve had kind of tapered off. And you'll notice this, right? There are days when you'll find it hard to go to work for some reasons where there's nothing new to learn, or you're saturated, or you need a change. Those are the days when you should look back and reflect, like, what's driving this? What do I need to do? So I'll pause here. I know it's late, but there is something that I would like for you all to try. I would like to understand you a little better. And if you don't mind going to menti.com, or those of you who are on mobiles, if you can scan this code and type in this number, there's a small poll that I would like for you all to take. Give me 1 minute. Are you guys able to take the poll? I don't know if you can see that. All right. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
So, all right. The question is, as you look back and reflect, what are some of the requirements you think are necessary to pivot careers? So one is growth mindset, which you all know, like you want to have that drive to learn more. Your network that needs to help you crack that next opportunity. Your spouse, for those of us who are single or who are at formative stages, it's family. And the last one is also true. A lot of pivots also happen when you're done with your current role, right? So, all right, this is interesting. So we're talking about growth mindset, we're talking about network, and we're talking about frustration. Okay, and family as well. This is good, folks. Thank you. Okay, I see some of us are still putting in, so I'm just curious to see how this stacks up for this audience. Let me give it another few seconds. Interesting. All right, so growth mindset. I'm saturated in my current role. I want to move. And then we're talking about network. And then last but not the least, family, right? So let me go back here. Okay, so networking did come up. I want to cover this theme first because it becomes important, right? So we all have very different aspects or definitions, what we consider networking. Most of us, it is like, how do I go in a forum where there are people who are influential? They are either peers, they're managers within our own firm. Who is it that can actually help me with my next opportunity? Who is it that can help me with pivots? So I was at that stage at one point of time in my career. I'd worked really hard. And as you saw in those options, I was frustrated. I wasn't seeing the growth or the recognition that I thought I deserved. I was working in a satellite office. I had international or remote managers. I was doing a lot. I was trying to cover different time zones, putting my hands up for all sort of projects. None of my playbooks that had worked for me till earlier, like work hard, put your hands up for projects, try and advocate for visibility. It seemed to have hit a dead wall. And during one of my trips to the headquarters here in Mountain View, there was this renowned coach. People used to wait for months to talk to her. I was fortunate. I knew I was traveling 6 months ago, so I blocked an appointment with her, 10-minute slot. But one of the things I was trying to tell her was like, hey, I'm stuck. My leadership knows I exist. I don't think they recognize my potential. I work so hard. I'm so driven. I'm so motivated. How can I find that person to sponsor me, that influential person? How can I be somebody's blue-eyed boy so that I get those projects? She listened very patiently. And one of the things she said that time forced me to rethink my whole idea of networking. And bear in mind, I'm an introvert by nature. As much as I have moved around through school, through college, or even at office, I was that guy who had very close network of 2 or 3 close friends. I spoke with everybody as necessary. So I never thought of myself as like the classic networker, the guy who goes in a room and then suddenly people exchange visiting cards, people remember him. I was not that guy, bear in mind. So what she said at that point of time, it still stays with me. So to paraphrase a little, she said networking is not about what the other person can do for you. Just for a second, assume if you are never going to meet this person ever again, what's the one thing they would remember you by? And where you've actually genuinely tried to understand them, some of their problems that they are dealing with. And when I say problems, it need not necessarily be negative. You may have an insight, you may have something which forces that person to reflect or solves a problem for them. And this, by the way, is not restricted to people that you didn't know. It could be for people that you know. It's important to know that. And she said, try going in with that approach rather than trying to think what that other person would do for you. And that became very interesting for me because till that time, I thought about it all like, what can this do for me, right? And which is why, as I started thinking about it slightly differently, I would also urge you to start trying to see if you can turn the concept of networking around. Like, why is it important to you? Networking is important so that the other person remembers you, but specifically in the case of pivots, network is important because look at it internally. Let's start with your manager. Your manager, whether you like him, whether you like her or not, end of the day, it's a small world, right? When you go even to your higher education or something else, like another opportunity, a promotion, or one of your leadership rotations, the manager is the one who has to sponsor you. Why would they do that, right? You build some credibility, you build some goodwill, you've gone beyond your day job. And that is why I think networking matters, because your past credibility in a particular area may not help you in the next pivot. And this is where your network comes at play. They advocate, vouch for you for your transferable skills. And as I look back, each of my career transitions, my transition from Infosys to SAP happened because somebody who had worked with, somebody who had helped, I didn't realize it, but stayed back one of the nights or stayed up over a weekend trying to help that person, remembered that and used that to pitch me for a role which otherwise I was not qualified on paper. Similarly, within SAP, when I moved from the Bangalore office to the Waldorf or the Germany office, there was one of my managers who put her credibility at stake, saying like, hey, this guy is smart, analytically, he's raw. He doesn't yet have the finishing skills, but he'll do the job if you give him 6 months. Somebody is signing that blank check for you. Somebody's putting that credibility. Let's not somebody who you've casually networked with, because there's no way that person would be able to do that, right? So it's important to think about this from this angle. And even when you're going to a business school or when you're going for that executive course, when somebody has to sign on your behalf, like an endorsement, one of the questions that the school always asks is, how will the cohort benefit from having you in the course? And that's where this network has to be able to talk to. So again, if I have to summarize, why networks are important for this pivot, think about what the person is interested about, genuinely try to get to know the person. These are the people that could advocate for you when it comes to a pivot. All right, let's move on. The next one where you mentioned like, hey, I need the support of my spouse, my family, and in some ways that's also the network piece. So it's very interesting for me when I see some of these articles that we have on leaders, like, are you self-made? Is there a support system? So I find it a little alien when somebody says they're entirely self-made, because very often there's a village behind you, and that's what I mean here. So for us parents early on, they go through a lot to get us through good colleges. You have somebody, a relative, or you have a mentor early stage who's looking for you. You have managers, your first manager. And then I'd just like to pause here when I talk about manager. You can treat a manager as a manager, but bear in mind, your first few managers will be influential. So how can you convert that manager into a coach? which means you have to go a step forward and be transparent with that manager once you've delivered and over delivered. Like, here is what I'm trying to look from my career. Manager becomes a coach where they figure out these are areas that you need to develop on. This particular area, like you want to up your technical skills or you want to up your client presentation skills. Manager has done that. So it would be nice not to use that skill set which is announced. It sounds hard, but once you won that credibility, the manager goes from a manager to a coach to a mentor, somebody who, once you've established that rapport and credibility, is helping you think through your career, helping you think through your patterns. And then finally, the most important part becomes a sponsor. And these are different roles, right? So a sponsor is somebody who's talking for you when you're not there in the room. A sponsor is somebody who's giving you that opportunity when you're not fully there. And this is very important for any pivots. So you need to find that. And a small anecdote that I have when I was considering moving out of SAP Labs, I'd applied to several MBA programs. I flunked CAT twice, but I did eventually get to NUS and Singapore, and I was considering moving out. And at that point of time, my mentor, who was one of my dotted line managers, said like, "Hey, Vinay, why would you move? You're doing so well here." I was like, "This is my career vision. This is what I aspire to do." So she was like, "Okay, so just for a second, you assume you left, did your MBA. What do you want to do post MBA?" I said, "Oh, I see myself in this technology, strategy, operations, talking with senior leadership, doing roadmaps." She paused, she reflected, she said, "What if I give you an opportunity like that?" And I was stunned. I was like, "Wait, why would you do that? Even I know I'm not qualified for that opportunity." And she said, "No, but I've seen you earn your dues. You finish your day job from 9 to 3. You put your hands up for projects, for products. I can see that. My colleagues here can see that. So I know this person who's heading the team. She's setting up something new and she's looking for folks with varied background. I'll pitch you for that role." What that means, however, is you'll have to forego your MBA. And because I'm going to ask her to trial you out, so you'll have to leave your role, your country, you'll have to move to Germany. And at the end of 6 months, if she doesn't like you, you may have to go back. And I was like, wait, that sounds good, but what if I don't cut it, right? What if I don't make it? My MBA is gone. I don't have a role and I have to come back to a job, which I didn't really like. I said, okay, let's go for it. But as I reflect, it wasn't so much about my taking that risk. It was more about somebody else sticking their neck out. And that patterns kind of, as I look back, that's happened to me again and again. When I moved to another role, that's somebody else has stuck their neck out. So I would say find your village and make sure they work for you. Another small poll. I'm almost at the end. I've got another one slide. So again, if you guys wouldn't mind going to menti.com, I would just like to think about what you think is, sorry, give me 1 second. All right. When you think about careers, do you think about it as a marathon or a sprint? Are you guys able to see my screen? Are you guys able to vote? All right. We have some answers coming in. Give it another 30 seconds. All right. So more of you think it's a marathon than a sprint. So let me move on to my last 2 slides here. So I wanted to draw a couple of sporting analogies. I'm big on Formula One. So if you see the screen, the picture on the left, I don't know how closely you followed, but on the extreme sides, left and right, it's Lewis Hamilton and Michael Schumacher, two of the most famous drivers of all time. They're both 7-time world champions. What I wanted to draw or shine a spotlight was the guy who's in the center. His name is Nico Rosberg. He's won the championship only once. But to his credit, he's the only person who's beaten both those world champions in the same car, right? And which is in Formula One parlance unheard of, because there are 22 of the best drivers who are competing. He beat both of them in similar machinery, which talks about the talent, the caliber, but he couldn't sustain that. On the right side, this one probably might be a little more familiar. This is Tendulkar and Kamli from early days. Tendulkar, of course, was the one who's shown more and who sustained this over a longer period of time. And there's a very interesting quote that Kamli gave when he made his first triple hundred, when people started paying attention. He said, Sachin took the elevator, I took the stairs, which means it took me longer to be noticed. I had to put in. But again, he was not able to sustain, right? And that's where you've probably seen this equation many times. The 1% that you put extra, it's so much more, it compounds as compared to when you are not able to put that, right? And that is why, as I look back at it, I personally, because I follow Formula One, I don't understand the analogy of pace yourself, go slow. It's like almost like an 18-month sprint to each role. When you're a fresher, don't think like it's going to take me 6 months, let me relax, or just before I'm going to get promoted, let me put in all efforts. Treat every journey as a sprint, but make sure you're looking out for yourself, look out for symptoms of burnout, know when to pull back, right? So that's why I wanted to also say it's a marathon that you're running at sprint pace. Last couple of points, we discussed these transitions. So people also say you should not give up, you should keep trying in your current roles, but sometimes also know when the current environment doesn't suit you. So if you're a person who's very, very comfortable working through in the back end, a sales job or a politically charged environment, even though you may like certain aspects, but yes, if you can see around the bends, you can't succeed. Try and find your way out, try and go where it resonates. And I've been fortunate more often than not, I found that environment. So make sure you are doing that sense check, because if you don't like the place, no matter how much you try, it's going to be hard. Last one, don't stop learning, right? So as I look back, every small certificate that I did, and this is what I think IPL is also doing really well. It's asking you to focus on areas that you're good at, but also look for finishing skills in adjacent areas. That's what allowed me to go to my MBA after 9 or 10 years. I had to get out of my comfort zone. And then even now during COVID times, I was fortunate that my organization is investing in executive coaches. I was able to go complete a Stanford course, which gave me a network. So keep doing this. It's necessary for pivots. Don't stop learning. So I know we are at time. Probably we have 5 minutes more, but I'll pause here and see if there are any questions, anything else that resonated with you where I can help you.
Thank you, Vinay. That was a fascinating journey. Many different directions, including some of them contrarian, from B2B to B2C, from a nice jet setting role into taking a pay cut in favor of the one that you wanted to do. And of course, along the way, finding the need and importance of upskilling yourself. So I think if I were to, great summary as well. Essentially, what you're saying is networking is absolutely critical. Of course, how you do the networking is even more important. Find your village, sprint versus marathon. You're saying try to prefer sprint as much as possible, and find your groove, right? What that means, of course, is find your own culture, norms, the place that you're in, and what you are, right, in terms of personality. And last but not least, upskill and reskill continuously, right? So if I were to summarize that way. So there's one really good question I thought we'll bring, at least just before closing this thing. The question is, how do you find your personality to find your career pivot? Is having a career mentor to guide you important? I mean, yes, the from the skills parts, it's really important. And finding the place that gives you the right set of skills, the right set of way, and the right way to learn it is absolutely critical. But before you even get to that, to find that career pivot, what type of person are you? What would you prefer? What might work for you? What did work for you? Did you have mentors, coaches to guide you? I suppose that's the important question.
Yeah, that's a great question, right? And I would say it depends largely on you as an individual. Like, where do you get excited the most? So, as I said in my career, I've seen folks who derive satisfaction by building on top of what they're already known. So it's not like, I don't look at it as like narrow vertical specialization, but somebody wants to go from a coder to an engineer to an architect, and that derives satisfaction for them in the sense that expertise. That's a different career path, and there you should look for somebody. I've always done this, like within my organization, I've tried to say, like, hey, if I had to go down this career path, who's somebody else who's already there, who's along that journey, and how can I find connect points with that person? Internally, are there forums that I can meet with, or externally, is there a way? It's not like adding somebody on LinkedIn and say, like, I would like to have you on my network, but like, is there a connecting tissue? Are there common shared interests? Is there something that they have done where you're interested in, you've read? That is one way I would say, is like find those touch points. And within organizations these days, organizations are pretty good at trying to facilitate that. COVID's been a challenge, I know, with remote and limited opportunities, but I'm an optimist. I'm hoping those opportunities will come back. But then the other one is where you say, like, okay, I'm somebody who needs a new challenge every 18 months or 2 years. So I probably fall in that category. So there it's important to explore everything that's on the table, including some of those other opportunities, because join those clubs or go for that extra certification or join that institute where you meet somebody who's like-minded, because they are likely going to be your next network or the link to your next opportunity.
You never know. Yeah. Don't network with the intent of getting something from you, is what you said before, which is, I think, very insightful. Of course, building the network is an art. It takes practice. It takes an understanding of how to build that network without anticipating a short-term gain. You know, the gains will happen, but not necessarily. Super. Thank you so much, Vinay. Before we let you go, I just wanted to quickly bring up Yogesh. That was a brilliant question. So you get the Marshall Scholarship Award. Congratulations. Let me jump quickly to the leaderboard. A leaderboard is where you guys can join and invite your friends for these amazing sessions, right? So that they can also benefit. Of course, the reach is only so much. Each one of you, if you ask 20 of your friends and peers and colleagues to join these 5 days of festival, of course, the strategy one will end tomorrow with an exciting open conference where community speakers are going to present to all of us on very interesting topics. There is a product design and data editions following every month, so don't hesitate, go and ask your friends. Right. The two other quick important announcements is there is a thriving product community that people are joining, exchanging information, sharing knowledge, curated courses, several CXOs part of this. So it's free. Go ahead and join in India. I mean, it's not restricted to only India, but majority of them in product roles or aspiring product roles in this. The other announcement I really quickly want to bring up is this community, some members of this community, as well as some of the IPL alumni have embarked on product leadership benchmark survey, right? So with the goal of creating a baseline to understand the status of product management and leadership in this country. So the goal is to reach and ask 5,000 of you to tell us your insights and answer some of these questions. Take it later. It's a reasonably long one. Interesting.today/benchmark study. Easy to remember URL or scan this QR code. Again, thank you so much, Vinay Shenoy, for joining us from the US and sharing us your incredible journey and also summary of what others people can take away and do a similar things with there. As a token of appreciation, please accept the certificate from us, digital one. Going to be a lot more digital in the next editions, either backed by NFTs or so. But for now, we'll have to make do with this. Right? Thank you so much and appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me, and to all 28 folks who are still here, thank you so much for staying back on a Friday night. It was refreshing for me also to reflect and learn and start thinking about my next pivot. So thank you so much. I love being here.